Hello and welcome to the Rogue Health Economist. This is episode 8, and today we are continuing our conversation about community. And I'm super excited to have with me today someone who I believe to be one of the greatest thinkers on the topic of community out there right now, someone who I have an opportunity to build a great relationship with over the last few years. And we are going to be talking all about different aspects of community, how it relates to health, how it relates to health economics. So a warm welcome to the podcast, Marc Winn. Welcome, Marc.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here.
So let me just give everyone who's watching a little bit of background. So in 2014, we did our first Evolution of Medicine Summit. And shortly, a couple of months after that, I remember I was in Istanbul. And I remember getting this email from you saying that you'd like me to, chat, and you'd put on this TED event, and you're from Guernsey, and I was super interested about it. We got on a phone call, and that led to me doing my TEDx talk, and our relationship over the last few years has led to the Journey to 100 project that we did in 2017 together, which was a journey to see whether Guernsey, an island nation of 60,000 people, could become the first country in the world to get to life expectancy 100. I still think of that as like one of the best things that I ever did in my career or participated in with you, a thing that we did together. I think like the videos really stand the test of time. And, here we are in the middle of, the COVID lockdown. And we had said that this year was going to be the year of resilience. And I guess it turned out that resilience was going to become a pretty important concept. So we're going to talk all about community. So when I first met you, Marc, you were on a mission to make Guernsey the best place in the world to live. And you had some metrics by which you were going to go, and you had some visions of what you were going to do and how it was going to work. Maybe just let's start by catching us up today on what's happened and where we are today.
Yeah, I mean, we're in just coming out of lockdown, I think. Well, I think I'll go to the backstory of why we started the project. I think in 2013, I was at a place called Singularity University, and I was in a biotech class, and they said, by the end of the decade, a kid in their room will be able to kill a virus. And I didn't sleep for 7 days after that realization, and started to, worry about how does community in the world adapt to that kind of situation. So that really led to the foundations of understanding why small nations have a role in developing the governance necessary to be resilient to future challenges. It's quite scary, really, the timing of this pandemic and the structure of the project and stuff that we worked on. But essentially, I've been a community builder for the last 6 years in a small state, weaving the fabric of community together in all sorts of different ways and trying to inspire a new wave of leadership and ambition. And it's interesting, do 6 years of seeding all these new ideas and new approaches. And I would say Journey to 100 is probably one of my favorite things that I've ever worked on as well, because it really did set the vision for what the future of community health and health creation looks like. And what's interesting is that the whole kind of, there are going to be a number of communities that emerge from this, and ours is one of them, that come back so much faster than everywhere else. And we went into lockdown 6 weeks faster than say the UK, and we're coming out of it faster, and we dealt with it. We got to the care homes crisis much faster. We now in the mental health wave much faster, and it's all come really as a result of the adaptability of all of the network of relationships that have formed over the past years. And islands have a distinct advantage for this kind of thing. And so we're seeing an explosion of innovation in healthcare. We're seeing an explosion of innovation in all systems, really, that are having to happen to adapt to this virus. But what we're seeing is this union between government and community under the theme of Guernsey Together, here where you've seen the symbiosis between the institutions and the community, and almost a change in the social contract. That community takes much more responsibility, government trusts community a lot more, and that's naturally happened within this kind of emergency situation. And so we're living in a very kind of extraordinary time, and I can imagine that there are, maybe a dozen other communities in the world that have had some form of community building process going on for some reason for a period of time that are going to come back really, really strong. And I think finally we're going to get the data sets to back up this notion of the link between resilience, economic development, and community building and health outcomes. And suddenly all of this data is now going to converge and start to justify a completely different way of creating transition. And it's no surprise that the most cohesive communities are seeing the best leadership, and understanding that from the voting process as well, is socially cohesive communities elect cohesive leaders. And the link between political transformation and health transformation and community transformation and economic transformation is all converging right now. And that's what's really interesting.
Yeah, that's super interesting, and I think that's exactly where you're sitting, and I'm sure it's an interesting viewpoint to be. So this this week is all about sort of community as part of this concept of the Rogue Health Economist podcast, where we're really looking at like how do we stop the sort of exponential increase in health costs, and how do we create structures that keep health costs keep health costs in check, and ideally start to like bend the curve and flatten the curve in the other way for costs to come down. And my feeling is that community is the sort of the number one resource for that. Maybe you could just share with our audience, like why have you built everything that you have on community, and why do you see this as sort of the central tenet of kind of all the things that you're doing?
Well, I mean, it's quite weird if you think about how we're structured from a biology point of view. We're designed to grow up in hunter-gatherer tribes where the young teach the old, and somehow in the industrialization of the world, in terms of moving towards big countries and big systems, we've broken kind of our biology collectively. And I think what we've really focused on is how do you weave the village back together. And how do you start to understand that we're really designed to work in this non-linear way to not create the very strange health consequences that we're seeing in the Western world right now? Because to me, which is really around mass individualization, big hierarchical systems, and the unintended consequences of those systems at scale. And so really we're requiring ourselves to go back to the village in some way. And that is very simple. At its core level, it's how do you get groups of people to work together again? And that could be in health creation, that could be in supporting parents at school, that could be bringing the young and old together. That can be, community can be built in really any dimension, but at its core, it's really around the village coming together again in some way and collectively solving the problems that you have, or laughing together, or community comes in many forms. And I think actually the less health focused it is upstream, and the more life focused it is, actually the better health outcomes one has. So it's really, it's a really interesting thing. But to me, it's about reconnecting the village or reconnecting the tribe, and biomimicking those old processes that we're designed for, in a way to kind of collectively get well, and then looking what the governance of healthcare or governance of society how it needs to change to allow that coming back together. Because the idea of schooling, for instance, splitting everyone up by age, whilst you stick old people in old people's homes, seems like a pretty silly idea from a managing the health consequences and education challenges. Whereas in tribes, the elders would mentor the youngers, and the teenagers would mentor the young kids, and we've got to understand that there are mental health consequences for these types of breakdowns in these processes. And so how do we start to bring all these systems back in all sorts of different ways? And I think this collective isolation is really getting us to find out what's important, and a deep yearning for a new way of being. And it really is, to me, about reconnecting with that village and tribe dynamic in all our systems.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess one of the things that I've seen, I wrote in my last book, was really like the value of the community is not just the value in itself, right, of the peer-to-peer delivery of information, but what this new container allows as far as like all the other things that we kind of know that we should be doing that we're not doing,
Mm.
in order to facilitate those health outcomes. And I know sort of at the journey to 100, there was specific themes that we went through. So there was the
Mm.
theme on sort of functional medicine. There was a theme of like food, the food system, fixing the food system. There was community as a concept, and there was things inside there with like exercise, even things like universal basic income. Right, we were
Mm.
at least 3 years ahead on that topic.
Mm.
So where are some of the things that you see that kind of stuck from that day? And I guess before you say what are stuck, like why did you think that the themes that we came up with were relevant, and how do all these things kind of work together?
It's just my son Noel's joining us then. Yes, I mean, so universal and basic income, really the theme was around self-governance, right? It's giving people the space and time to be able to make free choices, right? And as what we're seeing in self-isolation now is actually the implementation of almost a strange UBI 4-day week stroke free time process. And what we're seeing in this community is an explosion of food planting, an explosion of connecting with neighbors, an explosion of supporting community, an explosion of purpose, which again was one of the key themes in that thing. And so I think in terms of structurally, in terms of our system, what's really came out of the day was a new health framework, a 10-year transformation program towards partnership of purpose, is what it's called. And that was really in the early days around social prescribing in particular, and starting to build the systems around social prescribing. But what we've seen is the frameworks all get set, and government really trying to struggle to kind of make that transformation and dealing with its own bureaucracy, but set the intention. And then COVID's just come in and forced everything to be delivered in weeks rather than in years. But it was helped by the intention setting and getting it all into policy and into structure, and say this is where we want to go in transformation, and yes, and purpose and connection and social prescribing. And we have a separate institution called the Health Improvement Commission, which is a quasi-separate state, which is all now we're seeing the real stay well theme coming up. The rainbow, and Arunga Chatterjee talks about the rainbow, food rainbow, and now all the kids are learning about the food rainbow because rainbows are everywhere in our community on all the walls and things like that. And so we're starting to get much more complex health messages, distributing at scale, but using the infrastructure that was appearing in the transformation that came, as some of it to do with our work, some of it just to do with the fact that we can't afford the health budget to continue with our aging population. And so some very necessary transformations happening here, and small islands can transform quicker. But yeah, I think the theme that is definitely here is this idea of community as a way, or community and social prescribing in particular, and using the systems language as the primary mechanism for some of the healthcare transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the themes have been definitely like influenced over the years by the themes of our conversation, and really thinking about, what does it take to deliver those kind of ideas. And one of the ideas that was, in my last book was really that social prescribing in isolation is tricky to execute, whereas social prescribing in a group, certainly becomes a lot easier. I know that obviously you do have an older population there, but if you're going to try and get to life expectancy 100, you're going to have some old people, right?
Right.
That's going to be part of it. So is there anything that you see that's particularly interesting in the older population? Because this whole COVID thing really got me thinking, like, you look at the numbers from Sweden and you see, like, first of all, Americans don't live long enough to die like Swedes, right?
Yeah.
All the vast majority of deaths in people over 70, which is typical everywhere. But also, does it bring into question kind of what you were saying a minute ago, like, does lumping all the old people together make sense, if you're trying to create a resilient population? And I guess I'd just love to see, what is some of the innovation that you've seen in that area from Guernsey or outside of Guernsey, and what are some things that you would see are going to have to be necessary to get people to be living healthy in their 80s and 90s?
Yeah, I mean, it's no surprise. I mean, we've had 16 deaths in this community, most of them from care homes. That transition between most of them over their 80s, and just the lack of resilience with sticking a load of old people in one building, has demonstrated it's not a very resilient system for this. And there's a big care home crisis in the UK, and I'm sure all around the world. But then if you stick a load of old sick people in a building together, they're probably, a lot of them were dying from flu and stuff like that anyway, in that unhealthy environment. So what we've seen is this explosion of in isolation, because the whole population is in isolation, and the biggest problem, I think, can you please leave, please? It's like the BBC thing. This is a modern Zoom world we're in. Homeschooling and locking down, and my son is a misfit. He knows no rules.
Seems to be raising a whole generation of those people. Mark,
yes, they're going to be needed. They're going to be needed, but they're like cats to manage. So what we're seeing is, because we're all experiencing loneliness and isolation, all of the infrastructure to support us in isolation is building. So all of the businesses are adapting, all of the health delivery is adapting, all of the healers are like putting online programs, the yoga instructor, everybody's building infrastructure because they can't currently deliver in the physical space. And so what we're seeing in our community is suddenly all the people that were disconnected and left isolated have now got a massive range of social infrastructure that they never had before, because the social infrastructure is literally being built in weeks to support the rest of the population who've gone into the same experience that those older people were having. And so, like food delivery businesses, all of the things that are necessary, like an older isolated person can't go to the shops that easily. Now the shops are all coming to every house, and these cards, to support your neighbors and get them to call you and things like that. And suddenly all the relationships are all building street by street. It's a bit like the social streets model in Italy. All the streets are getting together to support each other and to support their neighbors and things like that. And so what I call it, to me, the interesting thing is COVID is building social infrastructure that's going to deal with loneliness at system scale. And that has extraordinary medium-term consequences for longevity, for social cohesion, for all these kind of things. So that, whilst they're seeing some other things, the rapid adaptation towards dealing with loneliness at system scale as a result of us all experiencing it, I think this is the number one innovation that I'm seeing in the world right now, and I'm certainly seeing it happen here.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. So what do you think are some of the best innovations that you've seen at galvanizing community in a physically distanced world?
It's the simple stuff. It is like the postman suddenly becoming the legend of the town, right? And then all the kids writing messages to the postman on the windows, right, in rainbows. And it's just like this kind of, all the lovely messages to the nurses and the gifts to the thing. It's like when we talk about purpose being the number one thing in health, right? Everybody's suddenly got purpose. The postman is no longer thinking they've got a drab job where they're, in rain or shine, delivering letters. They're suddenly getting wonderful love and connection. All the key workers, they're suddenly heroes. The low-paid people that are often doing really good work have suddenly come front and center to community. And so I think there's a different story of value going on right now, and we're taking the time to appreciate each other and send love from each other. I know you've been to Burning Man, and I have as well, and you see that different way of every interaction is different. Every interaction is more appreciated, more love-based, and things like that. And I think that, to me, I'm very much in, as Pam Woolhurst would talk about, the mass scaling of small actions as the primary innovation. And what we're seeing is a mass scaling of a shift in social interactions that are going to radically transform community. And to me, what separates something like Burning Man is like the gifting economy, and how everything is a slightly different act of love and generosity, and that moves everything. There's so much talk about changing big at the top end and top scale, but what really transforms community is these shifts in small action. And I think just the action of the rainbow in the window, thanking the postman, who's now become a legend because they're literally delivering everything. That is a symbol for me for this new normal that's emerging, where we actually care about people in a new way.
Yeah, and I think so much of what's been taken for granted, right, is now being like shined a light on. I think that's such a great point. I want to just ask you about a concept that I've been reading about a little bit here, which is the idea of counter-economics, right? We're talking the Road Health Economist podcast, right? So counter-economics is really the building of kind of resilient economic infrastructures that don't interact with the main infrastructure at all. So, during Journey to 100, my favorite talk, and I think the only one that got like a standing ovation, was Pam Woolhurst talking about how they had built these gardens and community gardens. And, I could definitely see that, obviously, growing your own food creates massive resilience for communities, and then distributing that food. I mean, we've even seen now, just the other day, I'm seeing like, these farmers, rather than dumping food, which they've been told to do because they can't do it, just opening the doors and say, hey, come on by and grab some milk, because we're going to be, we're going to be dumping this otherwise. And just sort of like this, it's almost facilitating this sort of counter-economic structure where, we're going back to one degree of separation between consumer and producer. And I can't help but think that something in there is going to be valuable for creating anti-fragility and resilience in communities too.
Totally. We're seeing an explosion of that right now. Because on islands, the supply chains are pretty brittle. And so everyone's realized, this really, COVID is the first wave. Everyone's seeing a big global economic collapse. And when you're on an island, as happened in the Caribbean after the hurricanes, you're seriously exposed if you're not resilient. And so, one of our themes has been get planting. And so everyone's really digging up their lawns right now. And we have this quite interesting food distribution system here, which is called Hedge Veg, where everyone has these little boxes on their walls and an honesty box, and people just sell their excess produce on the road, and everybody's making these boxes right now, and they're decorating them, and there's some quite high value products being sold. Like I was buying 50 quid of candles that someone made out of recycled wine bottles. Was just the other day, and so we're seeing this transformation towards the circular economy and the sharing economy. In terms of excess food, there's an app called Olio, which was a talk which all our supermarkets already distribute waste food. All our restaurant, we've already looked to really reduce our waste and put all of our excess food onto this food sharing app. And that's really gone into overdrive actually during this time, because the restaurants closed, they had lots of waste thing. We've got a lot of people that have lost jobs or not being able to get access to work, but there's already been a network of food distribution and free food distribution already in the system off a technology platform. That's just scale, but it was already in the system. And so there are these platforms. Some of it's timeless, with just people just giving food to their neighbors or dropping things around because only one person could get to the shops. Some of it's using technology and new platforms like Olio. But the fundamental thing is the biggest organizations, the more centralized organizations, not the Amazons, because there's a centralized bit and a decentralized bit that works really well. But the traditional retailers, the traditional stores, the big stuff, they're all breaking. Whereas the small, adaptable local businesses and local farmers, they're able to adapt their systems really, really quickly and deliver in these new gaps that are forming. And so we're seeing a real shift in the way the economy is working to much more local, to much more resilience, to much more generosity based, to much more people working together to solve each other's problems, rather than we've been in this very individualist big box type approach to the economy. But in Ireland in particular, most of that's breaking. So we've had to adapt and become more resilient and become more circular. But as a community, we've done it before because we were occupied during the Second World War. We had 5 years in isolation. So you got the older people, really holding a flame, saying, "Guys, stop moaning. This is how you survive. You put these seeds into the ground, right? Watch out, it grows by itself, right? Look at this, woo, you young folk."
It's a good thing this all happened in in March or April at the beginning of the growing season, not
I would
September, October, when you'd
divine.
have 6 months for food.
I would say, there's a lot of a lot of climate change movement. I'm poking fun at them. Some of my guys are activists and things like that. I said, you think all of that anger and all of that kind of stuff is like Mother Earth came up with a better solution than all of your activism, right? So some of the timing of all of this and some of the structure of this, it's either, it depends. If you're a hyper rational as I used to be, it's like, wow, that's very lucky. Or if you're more spiritual as I've become more now, saying that's about as divinely perfect as it could be in terms of causing us all to go through a grand initiation, really, almost to do what we've got to do in the time that we've got to do it. And we're realizing as a human race we can achieve a lot in a very short space of time to transcend the challenges we have. And so this almost, I think we'll look on it in time goes by as an extraordinary gift, this period of time. And whilst there's a lot of pain and a lot of suffering, I think there always was. I just don't think we were aware of it, and now it's bringing it all to the front and center of how broken some of our systems are. And I think certainly in this community, I think we'll end up healthier by the end of the year than we were at the beginning. We only had 1 week of excess deaths, but I think because of all of the social infrastructure we'll have less deaths at the back end of the year. So it's really interesting how we could end up as a healthier population this year than last year, despite having a virus. And I think the world will end up much healthier as it starts to redesign its systems because of, this virus really is the first mega shock. There's many mega shocks to come in the next decade. And fundamentally, any system that isn't resilient or anti-fragile is going to break under the wave after wave of new challenge that we're going to face from economic collapses to potentially more viruses as the technology to make them is in the public domain, and the inspiration to cause the chaos is in the public domain as well. This COVID is not the first; it's the first shock of many shocks, and we have to really redefine who we are as a species. And my conclusion after realizing this 7 years ago was that in the end we can leave no one behind, right? And in a world where one person can create global catastrophe, we have to focus on leaving no one behind. And that requires a fundamental shift in consciousness in the way we have in our way we cannot leave anyone behind in our communities, and we have to really innovate to a point where a completely different mindset about realizing that you're only in these resilient times, you're only as strong as your weakest link, right? And I think that is the biggest message. The countries that will find it hardest to transform and get themselves out of this are the ones that have got social issues that have not been dealt with, right? In America is a
let's just talk about that. Like, I know your vision was always that the lessons that you'd learn in Guernsey could then be, sent to the rest of the world. And this is like, I feel like 101 moment coming right now where we're having this conversation, and I live in America, and, most of the stuff that I've been doing for the last 10 years has been in America and creating more resilient medical practices, right? Taking advantage of telemedicine, taking advantage of community, taking advantage of coaching and those kind of ideas. And then now with Fine Functional, creating a structure where anyone can, create their own resilience, make themselves hard to kill, for the next wave, so that, we're creating much more resilient individuals, communities, families. So, just give us your thoughts on an outside viewpoint of America, and what are the issues that are coming to the surface now, and how do you see, what do you see as long and medium term solutions?
Well, the great thing about America is it's like such a extreme. Some of the most incredible people I know live in America, and then also some of this thing just that seems insane exists in America. I'm, part of me is always shocked and part of me is always in awe, right? So it's a very strange thing. So, you know, I'm a big believer that the world is going to work this out a lot faster than it realizes, because I think we haven't really seen what humor and joy and mischief will have on the global transformation. So I think the positive transformation, it's going to be quite miraculous and happen a lot faster. And how's it? In places like America, they've got to. This is an individualist focused society, and that is fundamentally broken. And so it really, America's going to struggle and suffer for as long as it takes to let go and go through that kind of collective ego death around that model. And so, because COVID's quite interesting, because, if the whole world went inside for 2 weeks and isolated for 2 weeks, it'd be over, right? But you have to be socially cohesive. You have to care enough to isolate for 2 weeks, and all agree to do it at the same time for it to dry out. And so the communities that are, protesting to go back to work and all of this kind, because they don't have the social infrastructure to support people in isolation and all of this kind of things, it's going to create deep questions around, the super wealthy cannot thrive themselves without everyone around them thriving. And this is the biggest lesson of the system: is when the Black Death came, the peasants all got a pay rise, right? Because the wealthy realized that they couldn't, look after themselves without everyone around them. And so the fundamental dawning realization is this is going to happen to the billionaires, all to the lobbyists and stuff like that, realize that actually there's going to be quite transcendent experience for them to realize that, whilst they're mowing their own lawns, or I see Elon Musk is getting rid of all his houses and things like that. Primarily, you would see that a lot of these guys are realizing they've got all of this infrastructure, all of this stuff, and they've got no support right now to manage it. And so I think there's going to be a big dawning realization on the wealthy class and the powerful in the States, who are really the power brokers, to understand that they potentially looked at this the wrong way, and this deep experiencing they've got. And the great thing is they're powerful lobbyists, right? And powerful lobbying can be used as a negative, or it can be used as a positive. And so what we're seeing is this convergence of agreement that's coming on in terms of a shared direction, that's certainly emerging in our community and is emerging in many narratives around the world, is that we're starting to, climate change is probably one of the interesting narratives right now, because we've got a deep sense of it, is that people are starting to realize that this is broken, and this is the example of this experience we've had in isolation is really creating an embodied experience. And so, I hold great faith that the weakness of America will become its strength, its capacity to do things big and at scale, and will make it, when it hits the tipping point, go through an extraordinary and incredible transition of boldness and wonder. But it's just a question of how long it takes to surrender to that particular process. And I hope it's peaceful, and I hope it's kind, and I hope it doesn't lead to kind of guns and all of the kind of challenges that come with that transition. But I certainly love America, and I love its people, and I love its possibility more than anything. And I really do hope it deepens into its potential at this time.
Well, Mark, thank you. I think really, I just want to share my deep gratitude for you as a friend and as a co-conspirator in this transformation and working together. I really do feel like so much of what we've done together thus far has been really valuable, and has sent shockwaves of good community.
Love waves,
love waves, shall we say?
Love waves
through the community there. And I really love some of the things that you said today about where we're going and where we've been, and what's going to take further this transformation, and super aligned with that future. And so we will keep up with you in the time to come of the Dandelion project and all the other things that you have going on in Guernsey, and looking at what happens and as this data shakes out, how resilient Guernsey has become. And I really do hope that the lessons from the more resilient countries and cities becomes a sort of a new normal in the spirit of empowerment, and all of the things that you shared there, I think were super interesting for me to consider as far as how I think about what we're going through as well. So I know this will be valuable for everyone moving forward, and I know that for those budding rogue health economists out there that are interested in flattening the curve of healthcare costs, we've got a lot of the fundamentals right here in front of us. So thanks so much for being part of this today, and look forward to more innovation in the future.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Well, this has been the Rogue Health Economist, episode 8. We've been with Marc Winn. He is a thinker, innovator, and he's operating on the island of Guernsey and creating the first place in the world to get to life expectancy 100. We're just on our route there right now, and so many great lessons. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.